Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston. And before we get started with tonight's authors, I wanted to just make a couple of general store announcements, let everybody know what is going on with us. So we are open. If you haven't come in and seen us in a while, we are open for browsing. We're still requiring masks in the store, and we're also still doing curbside pickup. So if you are not getting out and about still and you want curbside pickup, just give us a shout. We're happy to run books out to the parking lot for you. We are going to finish up 2021 with virtual author events. And then we're hoping in 2022, we're working on some stuff. We'll get some authors back in the store. But we are going to be doing one of our Murder by the Book Recommends events on Small Business Saturday, which is November 27th. You guys might have seen us do a couple of these virtually throughout the pandemic, but essentially Murder by the Book Recommends is just the staff sitting around a table in the store telling y'all about this one specifically. We're going to be talking about some of our favorite books of the year and some of our holiday titles that we're going to highlight as well. So we're going to be doing two of those. We're going to be doing one at 11 and one at 1 a.m. on Saturday, November 27th. We are not planning on streaming those live since it'll actually be the first in-store event that we've done since March of last year. We just want to be able to bask in being able to be in the bookstore with readers and being able to chat about books. But of course, we'll be posting the list of the stuff that we've been talking about elsewhere online. We've got lots of great stuff coming up tomorrow. If you are in the Christmas mood, I will be chatting with Louise Ennis, Maria DeRico, and Darcy Hannah about their new Christmas cozy releases at 1 o'clock. Next week, we're super excited. Sarah DeVello, who runs the Mystery and Thriller Mavens, has a couple of events coming up with us. But next Tuesday at 6 p.m., she is going to be chatting with Lana Wood, the sister of Natalie Wood. She has written a nonfiction book about the death of her sister. So we're super excited about that. So lots of great stuff coming up for the rest of the year. So make sure you check out murderbooks.com for that. And last thing I wanted to mention, as always, the best way to support Murder by the Book and the authors that we've been hosting virtually is to buy their books from us. I'll be dropping links to the comments or dropping links to their books in the comments once the chat gets started. But we also know that sometimes you might have picked up the book elsewhere and you're tuning into the chat. If you still want to support the store and you're looking for a way to do that, we are collecting books for the Evie Swarzinski Holiday Book Drive. Evie Swarzinski was the daughter of Dwayne Swarzinski. Unfortunately, she passed away a couple of years ago. And to honor her, every year they do a big book holiday drive. So we've got a page on the website with the list of books. If you want to donate something, you don't have to worry about shipping. Just pick in-store pickup, and we will handle getting all of the books sent to them. So I will drop some links to those once we get started as well. I think those are all of my general announcements for tonight. Once we get started, if you have questions for Sarah or Scott/Michael, please post those in the comments on Facebook or the YouTube live chat, and we will go to them in just a little bit. But for now, I'm going to make sure I have our author bios pulled back up and get our authors pulled out. We'll start with Michael, aka Scott. How are you tonight, Michael?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for doing this. I'm sorry we can't do it in store, but hopefully by the time you have something out again, we will be able to get you to Houston for some book talks and margaritas.
I was going to say someday under some name, I will see you again.
Yes. So you guys might know our guest tonight as Michael Koryta, or you might know him as Scott Carson. But officially, Scott Carson is the pen name for a New York Times bestselling author and screenwriter. He lives in New England. His newest book, Where They Wait, came out last week, and we do have signed book plates for it when you order your copy. Just mention book plates in the order comments, and we will get those, get one of those tucked in. And we're also excited tonight to have Sarah Langan with us. Let me bring her out. How are you tonight, Sarah?
I'm great. I'm totally excited to talk about Where They Wait. So.
Thanks so much for doing this for us. So Sarah is a Columbia MFA graduate and a 3-time recipient of the Bram Stoker Award. She is the author of 3 novels, including The Keeper. She grew up on Long Island and is currently living in Los Angeles with her husband and daughters. Her most recent book, Good Neighbors, just came out in paperback at the beginning of October. We also have copies of it in stock. So as I mentioned, if you guys have questions for either of our authors tonight, please post those in the comments and we will get to them in a little bit. But for now, I'm going to pop away and let them chat, and I will see you guys in just a little bit.
Hi, Michael.
Hello. Thank you so much for doing this.
I was thrilled to do it because I know of you, and then I got to read a galley of Where They Wait, and it's fantastic. So thank you. This is great. I'm so
Likewise,
excited.
I've enjoyed your work for years, so we'll have fun, I hope. Until you hit me with the really tough, nasty questions.
I don't think that's going to happen. So what I loved about the book specifically is that I really feel that it hits this feeling of uncertainty that we're all living in with COVID. And I think this feeling of every day is unpredictable. And I think there's this way that your book tapped into the unconscious of that, and it resonates for that reason. And so that's what I have to say, but probably you might want to start off talking a little bit about what the book's about for readers.
Yeah, I should have a pitch down, right? So I guess in 2 sentences, it would be, what if your nice, polite, relaxing mindfulness application that you count on for soothing qualities was actually trying to kill you? And with that cheerfulness, we're off to the races. The protagonist is a former newspaper reporter and war correspondent named Nick Bishop, and he's been laid off from his job in Florida and ends up coming back to his hometown, which is in Hamel, Maine, a fictional small town, college town in Maine. And he takes what he thinks is like the world's simplest and most boring puff piece about these guys who've created an app called Clarity that promises to, put you to sleep, relax you, reduce the anxiety. And then they have one little tweak to it. It will also shape your dreams. And so that's kind of the launching point of the book. And I'm interested to hear you say that you thought it resonates for the time, because the book is entirely a product of the COVID era. It's the only thing that I wrote that was conceived and written during the pandemic. I finished Never Far Away during the early days of lockdown, but most of that book was, it was written pre-pandemic days. And then this one just had its moment during those early weeks when I read something that mentioned the surge in mindfulness and relaxation apps. And it made sense. We would outsource our anxiety because we were trapped at home. But it was so easy for my writer mind to say, well, what if that was a bad idea? What if that didn't go exactly as planned? And so that was the launching pad. And I wrote it during, the home stretch of all the insanity that was 2020, from the election to the pandemic. And early on, there were references to the pandemic. I had characters in masks, and I removed all of that. I stripped it all out, and I'm glad that I did, because I think it serves as in a way, a better time capsule without all of the topical mentions. I think if it works because of the mood. So
I think you're right on that. I think I'm glad that you did that and to hear that, because it completely feels your storytelling like it's playing with reality, and it completely feels like it's articulating the mood of right now, and it's actually articulating, you may have anticipated second phase COVID to me, because right now it's like, I don't know what day it is, but it's supposed to be back to normal, and I'm not sure what's going on, and I don't think I'm the only one. And you have this beautifully written book about someone who doesn't dream, which is the first interesting thing about them. But then the story, I don't want to blow anything, but so much plays with memory and what does not dreaming mean and why. And I was thinking about, there's this the guy who won the Booker Prize this year. I haven't read the book, but I loved you probably saw this in the Times streams, David Gallant. His novel is called The Promise. And he said, I'm skeptical of the claim that novels change the world. Novels tell you how it feels to be alive at a particular moment in history. I see them more as a record than an agent of change. And it's been resonating with me, because I keep feeling like I'm supposed to make the world better by sitting in my room and making words up. And I wonder if that's a lie I'm telling myself. But what's more interesting, and maybe part of the job, is actually just to let people know where we are. And I wonder what you think about that.
That's a beautiful line, first of all. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's exactly, I think it's the job of a novelist at any point but it was a particular goal with this one. You mentioned the anticipation of a second wave of COVID. And I guess, I can't say I was consciously thinking about that. It was written during a period where I didn't trust that there was any, clear end date or out time in sight. And one thing that I did go back through consciously and try to strip away was any clarity of timeline. And by that, I don't just mean year, I mean days, times of the week. It's, you talked about the dream and memory elements of it. And that the last year felt like this weird merging of everything was as acutely stressful as you could possibly imagine. And yet everything felt distant, which was such a fascinating, horrible, but fascinating experience emotionally. You woke up and I'm going through the news and everything seemed terrifying and right outside the door. And then we would go out into the day and not really encounter other humans. And it was this weird sort of isolation that felt very claustrophobic and yet also very intimate. And there's something about the collision there that felt, it called to mind all of some of my favorite horror novels. I'm thinking of like Ira Levin, the way that he would write across time. If you go back and look at where you are in the narrative compared to where you start the narrative, I think by design, you're never exactly clear on that. There's always a sense of being around other characters, but you're sort of, it's like one of those weird dances. You're circling to the right, time circling to the left, and everyone's just in orbit together, but there's not a whole lot of intersection. And it creates a level of disorientation and isolation and claustrophobia that all sounds really terrible when I describe it. But when you think about the job of the horror novel, it's pretty ideal, really.
I have just reread Stepford Wives and Rosemary's Baby. And my daughter, my 10-year-old, is also obsessed with them and is finishing. She loved Rosemary's Baby and is now reading Stepford Wives. But I think that's totally true. And what I also love about those stories is they still feel resonant. And I'm like obsessive. So whenever I like something, I go look at the reviews. And people are still saying like, this is ridiculous. Rosemary would have gotten out of that situation. Stepford would never happen. And it's like, it's the same again and again of people not realizing that they're in the society that they're actually in and they're not identifying, which is fun. Exactly. But I wanted to talk a little bit about your main character, Nick's mom, because there's some let me back up. You have so many fun characters here and the dialogue is so crispy. It's great. It just sparkles. It comes right off the page. But also, I love the characters. And I think Nick's relationship with the people in his lives and these connections that he has also feel kind of COVID tenuous, particularly his mom. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, so his mother is in an assisted living facility, and he can go see her. He has some physical interaction, but he's not able to make that direct connection. And someone who was sort of an inspiration for her character was a woman named Elizabeth Loftus, who did a lot of groundbreaking and controversial research, contentious, I guess, into the field of memory and brought it into criminal justice. And particularly, I'm thinking here of the reliability or lack thereof of the eyewitness. And I first encountered her when I was a criminal justice major at Indiana University. And I think that's the first time I bumped into her work, but it fascinated me because it's one of those, it's horrifying in the practical aspect of we trust the eyewitness in a courtroom, and she was saying, maybe we shouldn't. But then if you go a little bit deeper there, you get into some of the levels of, can we even trust the eyewitness when we are the eyewitness? No one's getting up there. Most people are not getting up there with the intent to deceive. They believe that what they saw, what they experienced was real. It is the truth. They are sharing the truth. And I feel like there's something fundamentally more frightening about being the person who tells the lie without intent than being lied to. I was a private investigator and a newspaper reporter, and that sort of baked in skepticism of, I expect someone might try to deceive me, feels very natural. But you always come to that moment with the confidence of, I understand who I am and what this moment is, and I understand what I saw. And as long as those objective things can't be argued about, those are undeniable, then I can sort of feel my way through the darkness and find the truth. And when you remove that from someone, that is a uniquely terrifying sort of experience. So I wanted to use her as sort of a stand-in for that level of expertise. And she's no longer able to speak to Nick in the way that he wants her to, which is, I run the risk of a spoiler here, but it's not to say that she can't. You know, she has a message. It's just, it's up to him to hear it. And
right.
That was writing it. I would say writing his mother was one of the more fun elements of the process to me.
There's a bird I want to look up, but I meant to look up what it looks like and the sound it makes. And so grackle, yeah, everyone.
The grackle is, this is actually, it's a fun little example of the way you emerge at a place in a book in the process that you never expected to. So that I kind of threw in that reference to the bird as the most tossed aside glib joke, because my mother is a big fan of birds and watching bird feeders. Okay. And she always has been since I was a kid. And my sister and I would always laugh at, she's not a fan of the grackle as a bird. It's like, get out of the way and let's see some, finches, some cardinals, and something a little more, I guess, visually pleasing to her. So I was thinking, well, this is a one note joke for one member of the audience, being my own mother. And, she's going to see the grackle and say, well, why is that the bird you highlighted? And then I realized I don't know anything about the bird. And so I bump into this not because I'm trying to go somewhere with it at the time, but I don't know if this happens to you. I'll be interested to hear your experience. When I get stuck and I no longer have an idea of what the next scene is, I'll fixate on something that seems pointless just because it's convenient. So it's like, there is no stress at all in the first draft to describing these birds. I have things with grackles and loons. And to me, they were background noise. And then all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I don't know what happens next. I'll read a little bit about the common North American grackle. What harm can that do me? And something that's really interesting about the bird was the way they navigate. And so that, sticks in the mind. And then I get down the road and suddenly I'm like, no, wait, the bird isn't insignificant. The bird could actually really matter. And so I kind of lean into that, but I had no idea it was there. Is that what it's like for you, or do you have a better sense of things?
First off, even like the word grackle is great. Grackle. It comes in,
right?
You're reading it and you're like, okay, there's grackles. I don't know. It depends. I think with the last book, I decided I wanted to talk about mob mentality. So I researched Kitty Genevieve's, and then I researched like a whole bunch of things, but the Stanford prison experiments. Because I don't know, were you taught this when you were younger, that like these were true when they were in sociology classes?
Exactly. And then the number of people who supposedly heard her and ignored her peril, which the New York Times ran with some knowledge that it was inaccurate, but they liked. I can't think of the name. Is the documentary called The Scream?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't watch the documentary.
There's an interesting documentary about it, but they have the editor who ran it saying it's like it was making a bigger point. It was making a more important societal point. And that always just stood out to me as like, okay, as a journalist, that's a troubling thing to say, where you're bending the narrative, but also just as what you're describing, it's this level of we've been taught this story is true. And we not only believe it, but we can really begin to rely on it as our lens for seeing other things and understand
our understanding of human nature and
human
its
nature.
faults.
Exactly.
People are better than that, but it's a lie that sociology classes teach that we're worse than that. But also, if that was their the bigger reason they were telling that story, what I heard that it really did was that it validated white flight without blaming Black people.
Yes.
So if that's what they were trying to validate in the papers, they succeeded. But anyway, so I did that kind of research, and then I was like, oh, I have to make a much more compelling mob.
About, right?
Yeah. I have to make a much more compelling mob. But then for what I'm working on now, I decided that I was going to put in a labyrinth, because that was, so I did all this work on Greek mythology, and then I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm taking this labyrinth out. So the labyrinth is gone. So I don't know. Sometimes it makes sense.
It's all built around the thing that you don't really need. It's the thing that gets you to the actual story.
Yeah.
To me, that's the only way I know how to do it, though. I mean, I love the idea of coming up with a design and saying, oh, I can execute on this plan, and it will hit all of the notes that I want it to. But it never pans out. And I know that going in. I mean, I understand it. I've written 20 manuscripts now, 20 books. And I still, each time I come to the page, I feel like this will be the time that it goes as intended. And the fact that it never has before doesn't dissuade me from thinking it might this time. I might actually do it.
20 books? That's less than a book a year? Or is it a book a year? That's amazing.
That's right at it.
That's incredible. Wow.
There's a lot of garbage in there. So not the published stuff. I'm sure that's all great. You should buy it from murderbooks.com.
So you published your first book in college, or your first 2 books, right? That's incredible.
Well, okay, you went to Columbia, right?
Well, yeah. For undergrad, I went to Maine, Colby.
You're a black bear. Oh, Colby. Okay,
White mule.
White mule.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known.
Not a bear.
Okay, well, I mean, I was at Indiana University, so we had a much more relaxed academic schedule if you didn't go to class, and so the opportunities to write your novel if you didn't go to class were actually really easy to find on campus. I took advantage of that.
It shows a lot of confidence and a lot of diligence. I think it's awesome. But I want to ask you, so your other books are thrillers, but you switched over into, and Scott Carson, like, what's the story behind him? What's the name? What was the idea behind that?
Well, originally the idea was that I would never do something like this. And I would have the experience of publishing into the actual, the void, and being able to hand a book to a friend and say, tell me what you think of this guy, and hear the truth, unfiltered feedback. But that doesn't work out too well for publishing, and probably wouldn't have worked out too well for, friendships either, if I kept playing that game and saying, tell me what you think of this. But the pseudonym, I did like the idea of, publishing under a different identity. And the name comes from Natural. I don't know if you ever read the book or saw the movie, The Natural, but the Bernard Malamud character, the scout who finds Roy Hobbs, is named Scott Carson. And he's never on the page or on the screen. And we never really understand his motives. He's either trying to take down the hero or trying to take down the villain. And it's completely unclear. And I just thought that if you're trying to come up with an alter ego and sort of, literary tip of the cap, that one seemed pretty good.
I have not seen those, but that's cool. All right. I thought of, did you feel at all like The Dark Half? That's the one with the pseudonym, with the horror pseudonym.
The Chill is dedicated to Thad Beaumont and George Stark, who are the two halves of The Dark Half. And absolutely that whole experience, what King was doing with Bachman, and plenty of other writers have done it, but I love the idea of trying to really embrace it. But I thought it might play out where I would have a different voice, and I thought it might, I might be able to write in a way that actually came across as a different writer entirely, and that would be both fun and also a good exercise and challenge. And then I discovered that just does not work. I mean, I think if you picked up, I don't think it would have lasted too long, even if I'd been in full-on stealth mode, which that is on its own was kind of an interesting writer moment, because it was a reminder of the thing that we all bring to the table that's probably the hardest to shape and the hardest to create, which is you have your own voice. That's the one thing you bring to the table. You can do a lot of different things technique-wise and stylistically, but there is that storytelling sort of fingerprint that you can't change that as easily. You can change the name, the fingerprint is still there.
I think we all have the same themes. I'm in a writing group, and one of my kids opened the door. I'm going to close it in a second. I don't know if you guys saw them. But so I'm in this writing group, and one of my friends in my writing group said, I'm worried because you have something happening underground again. And people might think that, and I was like, that's all I do. Everything's underground. Like every bad thing is buried. And I think
multiple books about caves and underwater rivers, and so yeah, we sink to the same dark places apparently.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was also thinking about, so The Terror and Chuck Palahniuk's Lullaby are books that reminded me of Where They Wait for different reasons. One, thematically, The Terror has some of those, some stuff, the story, and then Lullaby also. And I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, or if that's too.
Really good calls, both of them actually. I wouldn't have necessarily thought of them though, and I think that's a really good example of what we identify as the influence for a particular book is probably bearing the subconscious influence. So they're the ones that you come to the page with an awareness of, and then I don't know if you've ever had this experience of you give a reading where you're doing an interview and someone brings up a book that you've written years ago, and you make a bridge that you didn't have at the time you wrote it. And a lot of times I feel like that ends up being the more accurate influence, which is, it's probably to the good not to overthink the books that are, sort of setting that high watermark when you're coming to the page. I think that would get in my head a little bit. Do you actually have touchstones?
Yeah, I mean, but it's the same thing where if I thought about it too much, I'd feel like I was stealing, or I would feel like I couldn't live up to it, or I would, stuff like that. Like, so I reread Carrie twice when I wrote Good Neighbors, and you wouldn't naturally think that they're similar, but there's a lot similar, because I was like, how do I write a page turner that someone won't turn down? And then, right. And then I was like, and I put in articles just like he did. Well, and I studied this technique.
That device I could see. So that is a conscious thing that you're thinking of then.
Well, I had always done articles before, but I had remembered reading Carrie in high school and becoming very upset halfway through the book because he reveals what happens in the end in an article. And I kept reading to the end because I wanted the revelation to be wrong. And I thought, when does he do that? How did he do that? I'm taking that. And I think I think it's okay to do. But I think writers are always in conversation with each other.
It doesn't bother me. That's an interesting, some readers get so angry with a spoiler from, if you're writing in a series, if you like tip off anything that would have happened in a previous book that they have not read. And I understand that, I guess, from the reader's standpoint, but from my standpoint, it's so disingenuous to the character's voice, to the narrator's voice, to not think about the past with honesty. So to get 10 books along to do a Michael Connelly run without spoiling previous Harry Bosch books, I think is impossible. And I know some readers will get angry if he tips his hand at something that happened earlier, but I've always appreciated the sort of honesty he brings to the characters in the world. I would rather read about this universe that feels authentic at the risk of some spoilers, then come, read books 6 and 7 and say, how are you not thinking of this obvious connection to, book 3? So that's one of the reasons I think I struggle as a series writer. I don't mind the spoiler, and the series reader tends to.
It's funny though, because you would hope that it's more about the story than the spoilage, and people aren't going to care because they're going to read it for the story. Like, we all know how Hunger Games ends. Like, that's not what it's about.
You would hope that, but it depends on the reader, and that's where you just need to kind of relax and say, this is the book is the boss kind of idea. You've got to follow the story and know that you can't please everyone.
Well, that's the same as the problem with going dark, I think. Like, I love writing horror and I love killing off characters. And sometimes that's a problem for the reader, and sometimes it's a problem for editors, how dark you go. And I think, but we're drawn to telling these stories. And I think people like them, whether they get upset in the moment or not.
Absolutely. And so, okay, I'm curious. You talked about being drawn to horror. Were you a horror reader your entire life, or did you come to that genre later?
Oh, for my entire life. When I was.
So what is, if you have to name a book within that genre that just absolutely grabbed you and pulled you in, what is it? Is it Carrie?
It's I think it was The God Project by John Saul when I was in 6th grade.
John Saul, okay.
I would go to this 7-Eleven, I'd ride my bike and I'd play video games, and I'd get a paperback, whatever it was. And it was always just John Saul on the paperbacks.
Yeah,
and I would take. Yeah. And then it was this picture of this baby pulling at her mom's face. And it was it was a mask, which had nothing to do at all with the plot.
But it hooked you. It pulled you right off your bike and into the store.
I moved on to Stephen King, but he was more literary. I was this is hard for me. And there's a buildup and there's characters. At that age, I just was where are the dead people? I just want so many dead people.
Yeah, you just want the hand reaching out of the grave there.
Yeah.
Could you go off and write something pleasant and cheerful, or would you have no creative spark for that?
No, I couldn't.
See, I want to, I'm the same way, and I want to be able to. I read, I don't know if you read Richard Osman. He's hanging out right here. I'll do my product placement. The Man Who Died Twice. I'll actually I had this out for a reason. I want to come back and promote the Murder by the Book book club, which delivered me a signed copy of that book. And I encourage everyone to join it because they really do have great taste. But I read his stuff and it's so funny. And he's a beautiful writer, but I want to be able to write something that has that sort of optimistic tone, a little more cheerful perspective of the world. He's telling serious stories about real people, but I think there's there's just a good humor to it that I always would love to bring to my own work, but I somehow go back toward the darker aspects of human nature. And I've stopped worrying about it, but I would love to be able to sit down and write something that has that, kind of feel. I just couldn't do it.
I feel the same way. I don't really care, but I'd like to be more of an optimist for my kids. I don't care for myself, but I don't want them thinking everything's terrible, because I'm and I must subconsciously think that if that's all I'm writing. But I also believe that it's impossible to believe in the good things unless the bad things are shown. And you can still tell a nicer story than the ones that I'm telling. I'm not speaking for you, but I don't believe that you can only write good things. I think there must be tragedy for comedy to exist, and vice versa.
Oh, 100%. I was just saying, as you said that, I feel like you hate to make the generalization, but I'll do it anyhow. I feel like the writers I know in this genre tend to be the funniest people and some of the maybe more optimistic. And then, you can meet talk about a stand-up comedian who you've ever met who feels as if they're at peace with the world. That I've never encountered anyone who can really write funny who seems not to be tortured by their relationship.
They're terrifying.
Yes, exactly.
They're like, stand-ups are the worst. They're like, I don't even want to know what the thoughts are happening inside them at night.
I always loved the idea of being a stand-up comedian. This was my 15-year-old dream, was to be a stand-up or a writer on. I set like very weird kind of limited Midwestern goals. I was like, maybe it would be good to write for a sitcom or like on SNL, but not be a performer. I would just be a writer. That seems safer. So like everything about Tina Fey in the early stages of 30 Rock, I don't know if you ever watched it, but her character just resonated with me. I was like, okay, that's who I wanted to be. I saw myself as I wanted to be in that crazy world of really funny people, but I would never be the on-camera person. And somehow this dream led to I'm writing warped horror fiction under a different names. That's how my comedy career panned out.
I think those are like great dreams, though. Like so tell me, you grew up in the Midwest, all right, my daughters are so loud. I have to.
Wow.
All right, ladies, can you be a little quieter, please? I'm sorry, I don't know if you heard, but they were like legit singing. So
I just heard what seemed like screams of pain and terror. But sure, we'll call it singing. Yes.
Yeah. So you grew up in Indiana, and then, but you seem to have a big connection to Maine. Do you live in New England now?
Yeah, I'm in Maine now. So I kind of split about almost perfectly 6 and 6. I'm here for weird times of year too. Like, on Sunday when the time change happens, I'll be in Maine, which is not ideal. I think the sun goes down at 4:20, but it's really a good place to write a book or read a book. I encourage everyone to come. I mean, you went to Colby. Come experience November in Maine. If you want to be a writer, it couldn't be better.
Or January, when it's too cold for your car to start.
And you might as well read a book or write a book.
No, I miss it. So do you have a writing group?
No, in fact, I have such little familiarity with any sort of organized writing education. I'd already published a couple books before I even attended my first writing workshop. And I ended up down there at Eckerd College in Florida because Dennis Lehane was teaching a 1-week workshop. And I loved his stuff. And I thought it was amazing that he was teaching. And the idea of something that I could actually go to for a week as opposed to commit to, an MFA program and get into one seemed phenomenal. So I went down, took that workshop, which really it was great. He's a hell of a teacher. And I met the woman who became my wife. So if I was in a writer's group, I don't know that I would be able to share work on a consistent basis. I loved the 1 week kind of like dip your toe in, have that sense of community. I love the workshopping experience, but I don't know how well it would work for me on a regular basis. Now, you said you have one.
I do, yeah. I find them helpful because I like to be put in check because I'll run with 80 ideas. And then it's nice when the group can say, like, how many of these are realistic and believable for your plot? So they save me time, my writing group. And
how many people
I like
are in?
That. 4, and then including me, 5. And we only meet when we have something to show. And then we just go to each other's houses. Whoever has the thing to show makes dinner and everybody else comes over.
Okay, when you describe that, it sounds amazing. And I want to have that experience. It's a high level of of trust. So the 5 members make sense. Like, I think if you get too wide, you would begin to struggle to filter out. Then it's like being in an MFA workshop experience where you need to sort of pick you're an ideal reader, you're not at all.
Yeah. But there is something nice just about hearing crosstalk and just sitting quietly and listening to people discuss your stuff. I really enjoy that. But yeah, you need. It's important to have considerate people who are working in their field. They're doing this stuff. But so what does an average writing day look like for you? I'm not going to ask, do you have candles? Whenever I do these, they're like, do you have candles you light? And I'm like, I no.
I will on probably Monday morning. When I get back to that time change idea, I'll probably light a candle. I try to keep a pretty decent schedule, because if I let myself wander, it's so easy to get distracted to the point that you lose the sort of emotional momentum that you had with the material. So I write in the morning, take a break, go for a walk, go to the gym, and then come back and try to take a second shift. So I'm pretty boring and like, blue collar in terms of I want to be in there every day swinging the hammer, because I know it's going to be a mess. And, that's the thing that once you accept that, I think I've had more fun with it. Knowing the first draft is not going to be the beautiful thing I can send in to my editor and agent, unless I hit deadline, and then my editor and agent will get a first draft. But ideally it's, I write that and figure out what the book is. And I would love for it to go another way, but it never does.
I love that. I think I tend to put too much pressure on the first draft and I take too long. So that's a good way of looking at it. Just go ahead and write it.
So you're like the Daniel Woodrell, Dean Koontz kind of, when it's done, that should be it.
Yeah. But then I still go back. So I might as well make it easier on myself and do a draft.
You should take the Koryta method, where you just kind of throw it out there, announce to the world that it's going to be garbage, and then it takes a lot of pressure off. I encourage the Koryta method to be embraced. And then it's a bestseller. So how does it feel to be on the bestseller list? What's it like? Do you get a phone call? Does someone send you flowers? What happens? You get a phone call, and then it's very nice and warm and blissful, and you move on, and you realize that no one really cares, and that you're probably not going to make it the next time out. And I don't know. Writing with an eye like up on the marketplace seems so terrifying to me. I think if I was not immersed in drowning on the book, it would become kind of frightening. I have like a fraught relationship with social media for just this reason. I love the chance to know what's going on with other writers and get to know other writers, but then I also don't want to know like what is actually going on in their professional lives at all. Like, I don't want to think about any other writer's professional life. Well, yeah. It's also like, I think your book also touches on this, and I don't know if we'll get time to talk about it, but the way that technology changes people's beliefs. And it's, I think social media is really stupid. Facebook has overthrown governments, and we have documented evidence of like the Gambia and terrible things that it's done. And, you have on top of that, we just persist in using it, and we persist in posting these frivolous doodads that people can interpret how they please, and we've given no thought to, and may be hurtful in some way that we don't intend, or may signify something about us that we don't intend to be signifying. And I think that's some of the issue. I never complain on social media because it's not my way, but then I'm giving people the impression that my life is fantastic, which is also BS. That is precisely the sort of struggle. It's like, how much of yourself do you put out there? And at what point are you causing someone else harm? At what point are you causing yourself harm? And I love the way you phrased it. It was like, you just did the demonic version of Elizabeth Warren persisting. It's like, we know this is awful, but we're going to just keep, persisting and banging our head at this. It is one of the reasons you touched on it, like the element of the book. It is one of the reasons I was drawn to write about tech and where they wait. It's that question of how willing are we to make a partnership with something that we know very little about, or we know that it might actually be harmful. And I don't know how many people feel, I'm trying to think if I've ever talked to anyone who says, I absolutely love my relationship with my phone. I think it's healthy. I'm on it the right amount of time. But we all, we're all still there. I mean, we come up with little strategies like, I could put it in grayscale. That might save my outsourcing my mind. So we rationalize everything and then still take a little bit of the poison. And that was the entire idea of the app of Clarity, was this question of how long will he stay with it? And I thought I would live there longer in the book, and the story went in a different direction. But I was initially drawn to the question of if Nick thought he was getting a little bit of help against a measure of pain, would he return to the well for that little bit of help? And that's really what I thought the book would be.
There's a lot of that there. It's still in there. I just wanted to bring up the ways that the children have become dependent on technology because of COVID. And it makes me insane. Like, in order for my 6 to 12, she's in 7th grade, but it's a 6 to 12, for her to go to school, she has to have an iPhone or some kind of app so that she can print up her daily pass, which says she doesn't have COVID. And all of their work in the California public schools, almost all of it is online now. They're legit shouting, "I'm so sorry." Can you hear that?
And this is what has happened to these kids. It's a live action example.
No, they're so happy now, and I'm not going to be like, "Get on the TV, go watch some TV so you can stop being so loud."
Stop being so happy, so vibrant and happy. I don't have kids, so it's a terror that I'm more willing to imagine than probably, a parent. Could you write that sort of dark story where it's Clarity, but it's picking on a kid instead of the failed?
I'd love to, but I think Feed, M.T. Anderson wrote this book called Feed, and they're all on their gadgets, and it's amazing. They all have, I think it's implanted in them. And what happens is one of them gets sick and she needs to have an operation, but the only way that she can have the operation is if anybody from her feed that's been advertising to her knows that she likes that stuff, and then they'll support it, they'll sponsor her, which seems like a very likely dystopia.
Reality.
But what she's done, I don't want to give away the ending, but it's a great book.
Called Feed. All right. That's one of my favorite things about these conversations is I always leave with a list of good stuff to read.
Well, and the other thing is, I was thinking about, I've been watching Dope Sick, and I'm kind of obsessed with Patrick Radkeep's work about
adaptation.
Yeah. And it's this idea of the profit motive, because I think the incentive, what Dope Sick is doing, and probably the original book, is talking about the ways that the consumer isn't actually responsible. They are an injured party. And I think there's a way of looking at it where when there's an extreme profit motive and an industry tells you this is safe, this is okay, this is good for you, please take this. And then you punish the people for taking it. You really need to look at the entire system. And it's, like the opium wars in China. They didn't want it, but there wasn't anything they could do about it.
No, and I feel like human nature. I mean, one of the things that helped me figure out where I was going with this book was to think a little bit about the way innovation has worked in history, and the idea that technology is always delivering something great for the human condition, something that is a true healer. And then it is also simultaneously, with the other hand, delivering a weapon. And it really comes down to who has it and how it is utilized, which is why I wanted to take the sort of origin story of the app back across the ages. But it always comes down to this question of how we use it. I mean, from whether we're talking about fire, which could, either save lives or destroy them, or we're talking about well, this is an easy question. Was there any chance that the Manhattan Project, in your mind, would have ended in a weapon that we didn't test?
Right.
And once we tested it, would we have not used it? I've read about that, and I try to imagine a scenario where they just create the weapon and they never play with it. And I don't believe that's real.
Yeah. Yeah.
It might be. Maybe somebody's sitting on some, Clarity-esque weapon that they have not released yet. But I feel like they're going to pick someone.
Well, yeah, no, I think I wouldn't be surprised if there is some kind of Clarity-like thing in the pipeline, some real thing. But the idea, what?
It could be there right now. It could be in the App Store right now.
It could be. It could be. But the same with the Manhattan Project, this idea that you create a weapon as a deterrent and never use it. When has that ever happened? When is it?
Right. If you can point me to that thing, I would.
Or someone down the line, if you can trust anyone. Yeah. Over generations.
I love the idea of passing so I don't want to, it is a spoiler, but the idea that there is this tool that could be used in different ways, that has been passed down across the ages, and it's coming full circle in the modern moment. I see John. He's probably here to end our fun.
I have a couple of crowd questions I want to get to. But before we get to those, Michael was so nice to mention the Murder by the Box subscription boxes. So I've dropped a link to those for anybody who's wondering what those are. We have 3 subscription boxes. We're adding a 4th one that we'll be mentioning in this week's newsletter. But essentially, there's a Best of the Month, which is a kind of hardcover of any subgenre, Crime Fiction Legends, which is 2 mystery classics, or a Cozy of the Month box. And you can get them as gifts. We have them available in 3-month increments or full year increments. And so basically it's the staff at the store picking out a book and sending it out to you. So definitely check those out. But before we get into the crowd questions too, Sarah, you've been so great to lead the conversation tonight. Can you tell everybody a little bit about Good Neighbors?
Oh, sure. It is a suburban noir with some horror aspects to it. And it's about newcomers, fish out of water family who've scrimped for years to buy a piece of the American dream, this small rundown house on a nice cul-de-sac in a nice town in Garden City. And they try and make it work, but very quickly they get blamed for this sinkhole that opens in the middle of the block because it's set a little bit in the future, and it's climate change has already taken its hold. And they're blamed for an accident. And the neighbors begin to act like a mob. And I was inspired by the Monsters Are Due on Maple Street from that Twilight Zone episode.
I was going to say, you tipped the hat to Maple Street in the actual name. I like that. Great book. Also, The Missing and the Keeper.
And Audrey's Door, too. So...
Perfect. So, Michael, Sally is watching from home and she says, hi. She wants to know, because you asked Sarah, she wants to know, what horror books did you read first?
First of all, hi, Sally. I miss seeing her at the store, or anyone at the store. First horror books, I would say John Bel Ayers, who wrote The House with the Clock in Its Walls. So that's as a kid, those would have been the first that I considered, more of the supernatural genre. Lois Duncan was also doing some kind of gothic stuff. And then the first, in adult fiction, it would have been Stephen King. The Shining was, The Shining was the world-changing book.
So how old were you when you read that?
I think I was 12 because I remember my sister and I were feeding our neighbor's cats, and I was taking the book from their house and bringing it back and reading it and then returning it. So I say taking, I was stealing the book, but I knew my parents wouldn't want me to read it. So I was like slipping that one back and forth from the neighbor's house to my own. So 11 or 12.
Yeah. It's so funny. Sally and I were talking the other day. Because I read it around like 11, and like my parents knew what I was. I mean, they didn't know what I was reading, but they knew I was reading it. They didn't think they knew what it was. But like she was like, "You read it when you were 11?" I'm like, "Yeah, I probably shouldn't have, but I read it when I was 11. That's probably why I'm still absolutely terrified of clowns."
It's the right age. It's perfect.
So I don't think you guys have touched on it, but can you tell everybody, for both of you, a little bit about what you're working on next? Let's start with Sarah.
I am so sorry if you can hear my screaming kids. They're like possessed tonight. I don't even know. So my apologies to everyone. It's the first time this has happened. I don't know. So
Sarah's working on household discipline tonight.
It's like Friday, they're tired, they're just like shouting. So my next book is called Mom's Night Out, and it's about this, it's set in the near future, and it's the idea behind it is that there are these towns that are owned by companies, and they're walled in and closed off, and they're very wealthy. And it's what happens to this couple who decide that they're gonna move in for the health of their children. They're gonna go there, but this town has ideas that are very Shirley Jackson.
Ooh. Very cool.
And read that. I'm working under my other name, so I'm working as Koryta right now, and the book is called An Honest Man. I think it'll be out next fall, hopefully, and set off the coast of Maine. We have a lobster man who goes out to a luxury yacht and finds 7 people who have been butchered and left on board. And then he returns, as we get back to the sort of the eyewitness idea, he returns with the notion that he can just report the crime. And there's, as long as you are telling the truth and doing the right thing, what harm could possibly come to you? And that's the first chapter, so I'll go ahead and some harm can come to him.
Perfect. So I think that's going to about do it for us this evening. To recap for anybody who might have joined us late, we have been chatting with Michael Koryta, who's wearing his Scott Carson cap today because Where They Wait, the newest Scott Carson book, has just come out, and we do have signed book plates to go with it. And we've been so lucky to have Sarah Langan with us to join to lead the conversation. Her book, Good Neighbors, has recently come out in paperback. We've got copies of both of them in stock. If you missed any part of the chat, once we're done talking, Facebook will archive and so YouTube will archive them so you can go back and watch them. We were lucky enough to get to chat with Koryta and Sandra Brown at some point in the pandemic, maybe earlier this year, maybe last year.
I was thinking February or March. That was.
Yeah. So if you want to check that out, it's up on the YouTube channel as well. Sarah, Michael, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. And
Thank
everybody
you.
listening, do remember it's really important to buy from Murder by the Book when you're buying your book. It makes a difference. And Michael, it was so great to meet you.
This was completely my pleasure. I hope we can do it in person like real humans soon.
All right. Well, you guys take care. Have a good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.